Hello colleagues, and welcome to today's webinar on NCFE's approach to awarding for 2020-2021. My name is Paul White and I'm the Head of Provider Development at NCFE. The Provider Development team are responsible for helping customers deliver our qualifications through a range of interventions, including online CPD, workshops, training days, and one-to-one support sessions. The purpose of the session today is to share with you the approach NCFE will be adopting to the awarding of qualifications in 2020-2021. The aims for this session are to set out the context of the EERF and the VTQ Contingency Regulatory Framework, or the VCRF, to confirm our approach to awarding for 2021, to clarify the position regarding teacher assessed grades and what qualifications are in scope and out of scope for teacher assessed grades. We aim to articulate the quality assurance process we will follow, and finally explain what further support you can access from NCFE. Let's turn first then to the external environment and the regulatory context of today's session. Since the spring of 2020, the coronavirus pandemic has caused substantial disruption to teaching, learning, and assessment activity in all parts of the education sector. Throughout this time, we have done as much as we can to support centres in mitigating the impact of the pandemic on learners' attainment, certification, and progression. Let's just reflect on the adaptations we made in autumn 2020. In October 2020, Ofqual published the Extended Extraordinary Regulatory Framework, or the EERF. The EERF gave awarding organisations like NCFE flexibility to adapt assessments to help mitigate the impact of the pandemic on centres and learners. In October 2020, we published an adaptation blueprint summarising how we would adapt each of our main assessment types. We applied the blueprint to each of the qualifications in our portfolio and published an adaptation addenda for each one of these on QualHub. At the beginning of January 2021, the government decided to close colleges and schools and took the view that it is not viable for external exams to go ahead for some vocational and technical qualifications. On the 15th of January 2021, Ofqual launched a consultation on alternative awarding arrangements given the impact of the pandemic on centres and learners and the decision to cancel exams. On the 25th of February 2021, Ofqual published the outcome of the consultation, confirming the qualification groups that can be awarded through a teacher assessed grade and those that can't. On the next slide, we'll look at this in more detail. Having confirmed the overall position, Ofqual will now consult awarding organisations on the technical and the regulatory changes required to support their approach. We will not be able to finalise certain aspects of our approach to awarding until that technical consultation has closed. This is expected to be by the end of March 2021. During this period, we will continue to work closely with Ofqual, other sector bodies and awarding organisations, and we will provide centres with further advice, guidance and final confirmation of all aspects of our approach as soon thereafter as we are able. Let's look then at the different qualification categories and what Ofqual have confirmed. Firstly, the Ofqual Group 1, these are qualifications that are most similar to GCSEs, AS and A levels. These are qualifications that are most similar to GCSEs, AS and A levels and are important for progression to further study, higher education or employment. They can be awarded through a teacher assessed grade, i.e. previously prescribed assessments may be replaced with a teacher assessed grade where those assessments have not been completed due to, for example, the cancellation of exams. Secondly, qualifications not similar to GCSEs, AS or A levels, which is in the Off-Qual Group 3. These are qualifications which are smaller and taken for mixed purposes, e.g. not like GCSE or A levels in their structure. So this would include, for example, functional skills or skills for life. They will continue remotely or in person in line with public health measures. These qualifications can be awarded through a teacher assessed grade only where assessments cannot take place on public health grounds or remotely. Finally, there are a group of qualifications with occupational skills or proficiency assessments which sit in the Off-Qual Group 2. This includes occupational license to practice, professional and continuing professional development qualifications, and some other off-qual regulated vocational and technical qualifications, or VTQs, which are not typically used to support progression. These qualifications are normally used to enter directly into employment. They will not be awarded through a teacher assessed grade. This is because it is not possible to award these qualifications safely, reliably, and validly without the knowledge, skills, and behaviours having been demonstrated and assessed. They will continue to be assessed in the manner prescribed for each qualification by the awarding organisation, including whatever adaptations have been made to mitigate the impact of the pandemic. Throughout the current academic year, we have looked to do everything we can to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on centres and your learners. We appreciate that the pandemic has caused acute and unprecedented challenges for you and want to do everything we can to help. 4 principles have driven our response to the pandemic. Firstly, supporting learning progress. In looking at our qualifications, assessment methods, and the wider support we offer, we have focused relentlessly on how we can support learners' achievement and progression in spite of the pandemic. Secondly, maintaining rigour and robustness. Particularly in the current circumstances, we understand the importance of rigour, robustness, and maintaining the validity of our qualifications as the validation of learners' skills, knowledge, and understanding. Thirdly, streamlining and supporting centres. We appreciate that centres and your staff are working in acute circumstances to support your learners. So we need to help you by making our awarding arrangements as simple and streamlined as possible and providing you with exceptional support and customer service. Finally, working in partnership for the benefit of learners. The current context demands that partners across the sector work proactively and effectively together in support of centres and your learners. We've done that throughout by working with other awarding organisations and sector partners to consider particular adaptations. These principles shape the changes we made to our qualifications, assessments, and operational processes in the autumn, and the further adaptations and new arrangements we're describing in this webinar today. So, let's look at those qualifications which cannot be awarded by a teacher assessed grade. Off-Qual's expectation is that teacher assessed grades should not be used to award qualifications where it is not possible to award safely, reliably, and validly if the knowledge, skills, and behaviours have not been demonstrated and assessed. This includes occupational, licence to practice, professional and continuing professional development qualifications, and some other Ofqual regulated vocational and technical qualifications, which are not typically used to support progression. We have reviewed our portfolio of qualifications against the criteria which Ofqual has set out and produced a list of qualifications that can and cannot be awarded through a teacher assessed grade. You can find this link at the foot of this slide. Let's look at how these qualifications have been adapted to support centres and learners. As you will be aware, in the autumn, we substantially reviewed our qualification portfolio and substantially adapted many of our assessment methods to help centres mitigate the impact of the pandemic on learners. Given additional flexibility now afforded to us by Ofqual, we have now completed a further review of qualifications that cannot be awarded through a teacher assessed grade, and wherever we can do so without undermining the purpose or the validity of the qualification, have removed qualification content to make it easier for centres and learners to complete the whole qualification. We have done this at qualification level by reducing the rule of combination and/or removing learning, outcome and assessment criteria. Where appropriate, we have consulted industry sector partners before adapting qualification content in this way, given the importance of maintaining the value of the qualification to learners as they look to progress in their chosen occupation. Turning now to how the assessment of these qualifications has been adapted. We substantially reviewed our approach to assessment in the autumn. In doing that, we took full advantage of all the flexibilities available to us under the EERF. As such, there are very few further changes that we can make at this point. Nevertheless, we have removed assessment requirements that relate to qualification content. We have removed through our consideration of qualification adaptations. We've introduced our remote invigilation offer, through which functional skills qualifications may be assessed anytime, anywhere, and online. Provided additional guidance on the observation of competence in the workplace or through a mandatory work placement. A summary of the assessment adaptations we have applied to our qualifications, including both the adaptations we applied in autumn and any supplementary changes we have been able to make in spring 2021, can be found within the blueprint in Annex A of our approach to awarding document. The position for each qualification is confirmed in the updated adaptation addenda, which can be found on QualHub. So, how will these qualifications be awarded? These qualifications will be awarded on the basis that assessments must still or have already taken place. The adaptations discussed are designed to use all flexibilities available to us to support learners to complete their course and qualification. Where the qualification has been adapted to reduce assessment requirements and therefore the rule of combination for qualification achievement, it will be confirmed in the qualification addenda. However, whilst we update our portal to reflect these changes, you will be unable to claim using the reduced rule of combination at the current time. We will share further updates once this has been complete, allowing you to claim certificates accordingly. Where learners cannot complete a given assessment, they may meet the requirements for special consideration. Although Ofqual has confirmed that special considerations will not apply to learners who are not able to sit assessments because they have not been taught the qualification content. As of the first week in March, we are reviewing our special considerations policy to ensure that it best supports centres and learners in a pandemic context. We will provide further advice on this as soon as possible, in line with all available technical and regulatory requirements following further Ofqual consultation. Where learners are not able to complete assessment activity prescribed in the updated adaptation addenda and are not eligible for special considerations, centres may judge it necessary to delay learners' completion of their course until such requirements can be met. Okay, let's look now at those qualifications which can be awarded by a teacher assessed grade. Ofqual's expectation is that teacher assessed grades should be used to award qualifications that are primarily taught alongside or instead of GCSEs, AS and A levels, including vocational qualifications which are important for progression to further study or employment. In other words, the Ofqual Group 1. Qualifications that are not like GCSE or A levels in their structure, such as functional skills, skills for life, etc., will continue remotely. They can be awarded through a teacher assessed grade, but only where assessments cannot take place on public health grounds or remotely. They are collectively in Ofqual Group 3. We have reviewed our portfolio of qualifications against the criteria which Ofqual has set out and produced a list of qualifications that will and will not be awarded through a teacher assessed grade, which you can find using the link at the foot of this slide. So, how will these qualifications be awarded, i.e. those that are subject to a teacher assessed grade? These qualifications will be awarded on the basis that, where the required assessments have not all been completed, a teacher assessed grade may be provided, subject to the approach and requirements we set out, and subject to the outcome of the Ofqual technical and regulatory consultation. Where a learner has already banked achievement for either internal or external assessment, this can be retained for awarding and no teacher assessed grade is required. However, had your learners planned on completing this assessment again within the applicable time period, a teacher assessed grade can still be submitted. Within the group of qualifications that can be awarded through a teacher assessed grade, there is a small number, those most closely aligned to GCSEs and A levels, in relation to which we need to do some further work with Ofqual and others before finalising a shared approach. This includes applied generals, T-levels, VCerts and other performance table qualifications. For functional skills qualifications, we will work closely with Ofqual and other awarding organisations to develop a common approach to determine when a learner can be awarded through a teacher assessed grade, and we'll share this when confirmed. We will provide further advice on these qualifications as soon as possible. In the meantime, centres should not assume that the approach to a teacher assessed grade described here will be applied to this group of qualifications. Let's now look at how a teacher assessed grade will work. We will finalise working with Ofqual and other awarding organisations as soon as possible, and we expect this to be by the end of March 2021. It's the current view that teacher assessed grades should be offered only where it is not possible for an assessment to be completed. Where learners can complete assessments prescribed in the adaptation addenda, they should do so. Teacher-assessed grades should be offered at assessment level. This will enable, for example, learners in the first year of a 2-year course to have their first year's expected attainment acknowledged in the same way as a completing learner. Where a teacher-assessed grade is offered, it must be considered with reference to the purpose of the qualification and associated achievement criteria, such that where learners are awarded a given qualification, they have attained at that level. We will allow centres to collate and consider a wide variety of evidence and types of evidence to support the teacher-assessed grades they offer. We understand the context in which centres are operating, so do not believe it is helpful or realistic for us to set strict prescriptive evidence requirements. Rather, we will empower centres and teachers. Through our normal channels, we will conduct substantive external quality assurance on teacher-assessed grades to ensure consistency and compliance with the requirements we set out. In doing this, we will assure the process through which centres have determined grades and the evidence you have collected to underpin them. We will provide support and guidance to centres throughout this process, working with you in mitigating the impact of the pandemic on learners' attainment, certification and progression. We are currently preparing detailed guidance that reflects the approach and thinking described above. We will provide more information to centres as soon as possible. So, what is a teacher-assessed grade? A teacher-assessed grade is a formal judgment of learner attainment against the requirements of a given assessment, offered by a centre where it has not been possible for the learner to complete the assessment that would usually be required. A teacher-assessed grade should be based on as much teaching, learning and assessment activity as possible. It should only be offered where learners cannot complete prescribed assessments, for example, because exams or other forms of assessment have not been completed. It should represent a holistic view of learner attainment offered by centres and teachers based on teaching, learning and assessment activity that has been completed. A teacher-assessed grade should be supported by substantial evidence of learner attainment collated from learners, teachers and centres with reference to our minimum requirements. Finally, they should be offered to us with respect to each assessment that would normally form part of the qualification requirement, where the assessment has not been completed. It is important to note a teacher grade should not be offered in the absence of teaching, learning and assessment activity. It shouldn't represent centres and teachers' view of how a given learner would have performed if cancelled exams and other assessments had gone ahead, nor should it represent centres and teachers' view of how a given learner has the potential to perform or might perform in the future. Finally, it should not represent centres and teachers' views of how a learner may have performed had the pandemic not impacted their course. So, what are our evidence requirements for teacher-assessed grades? We understand that the pandemic has impacted different centres, qualifications and learners in different ways, and that we need to offer an approach that enables centres to fairly reflect the different ways in which your learners have been impacted by the pandemic. With this in mind, we do not believe that it is possible or pragmatic for us to prescribe specific evidence requirements for individual qualifications or assessments. Rather, we will expect as a minimum that you collate reasonable and substantial evidence of learner work which demonstrates to you and us that they have met the purpose and achievement criteria of the qualification. The purpose and achievement criteria for each of our qualifications is set out in the qualification specification and adaptation addenda, which can be found on QualHub. Please note that we have not removed qualification content or assessment criteria from qualifications that may now be awarded through a teacher assessed grade, because we want to ensure that all learning and assessment activity that has taken place can contribute to a given learner's teacher assessed grade and overall attainment. Turning now to the evidential requirements for a teacher assessed grade. Evidence for a teacher assessed grade may include, for example, the outcome of already completed assessments, evidence from a teacher conducted formative assessment activity, evidence from a centre devised and/or sample assessment activity, evidence from assessments set by NCFE, including, for example, controlled assessments, evidence from internal assessment activity, including synoptic assessments, and evidence from class or homework. Unless stated otherwise within the relevant adaptation addenda, we will not issue alternative assessment tasks to replace cancelled external assessments. We will provide further advice and support to centres on how you might devise assessment activities to support our approach to a teacher assessed grade in the coming days and weeks. Just before we move on, a note on invalid evidence. We will not accept any of the following evidence to support teacher assessed grades. Learner performance on other unrelated qualifications, planned delivery set out, for example, in schemes of work or course handbooks, guided learning hours that have been completed, the content delivered, or learner attendance. We will expect centres to document the process they have used to prepare and evidence the teacher assessed grades you offer to us. Our external quality assurance processors will consider your process and the evidence you have prepared for each student. More on that in a few minutes. So let's look at how centres should prepare for teacher assessed grades. Given the approach and requirements described earlier, we expect that centres will continue to deliver as much teaching, learning and assessment activity as possible in the time available to you through the remainder of this session. You should continue to assess learners as you normally would against the qualification content and assessment criteria set out in the qualification specifications and the associated adaptation addenda. You should also ensure that teaching and assessment focuses on mandatory content for the qualification with reference to the requirements set out again in the adaptation addenda. Finally, start collating the evidence you need to meet the minimum requirements we have set out, including by devising and delivering assessment activity with your learners. We will provide further advice on when and how teacher assessed grades should be submitted to us in the coming days and weeks. As noted earlier, within the group of qualifications that can be awarded through a teacher assessed grade, there is a small number, those most closely aligned to GCSEs and A-levels, in relation to which we need to do some further work with Ofqual and others before finalising a shared approach. These qualifications are as follows: Technical Award V-Certs and other graded performance table qualifications, the T-level technical qualification in education and childcare, level 3, core maths, level 3 certificate in maths for everyday life, and the early years educator qualifications. We appreciate that you need clear advice and guidance from us on these qualifications as quickly as possible, and we will work with Ofqual and other sector partners and awarding organisations to provide it. In the meantime, we would encourage centres to continue with as much teaching, learning and assessment activity as you are able, collating evidence that may support a teacher assessed grade as you do. As centres will be aware, we already operate robust external quality assurance arrangements which help us to ensure the robustness, fairness and the validity of the qualifications we award. We will continue to operate external quality assurance arrangements through the remainder of the current session and will adapt our approach to support centres and teachers as you prepare and submit teacher assessed grades to us. Subject to further discussion with centres and the outcome of the forthcoming Ofqual consultation with awarding organisations on the regulatory requirements that will underpin teacher assessed grades, we propose to adapt our approach to quality assurance summarised in the following 6 steps. So step 1. Once we have issued final guidance on our approach to teacher assessed grading, we will ask centres to prepare a simple policy statement on how you will prepare, collate evidence for and submit teacher assessed grades to us, including, for example, how you will conduct internal quality assurance. We expect that this will be very similar to the approach that general qualification awarding organisations will also require of you. Step 2. Once you have submitted your teacher assessed grade policy to us, we will review it against our and Ofqual's requirements and, by exception, will provide you with additional guidance and direction to ensure that your approach is compliant. You should not submit teacher assessed grades to us until we have confirmed that we are content with your policy. Step 3. EQA activity will continue largely as normal through the spring and summer term, with EQAs supporting, advising and challenging centres on your approach to and the evidence you are preparing to support teacher assessed grades before and after submission to us. We are investing in additional EQA activity to ensure that centres can access the support you need to prepare valid teacher assessed grades for your learners. Step 4. We are currently making changes to our portal that will enable you to submit teacher assessed grades to us. Unlike last year, you will be able to submit grades through our main portal rather than a separate one. You should not submit teacher assessed grades to us until we confirm that you are able to do so. We will do this via our weekly newsletter, website, and other communication channels. Step 5. In addition to usual activity, our external quality assurance team will also complete risk-based reviews of grades submitted by centres. As a result of these desk-based reviews, we may require further information or engagement with you before confirming learner details. As normal, we will reserve the right to conduct formal investigations where we are concerned about a given centre's practice and may hold results whilst we do so. We will provide more information on this process in due course. Finally, step 6. Centres should retain the evidence that you've collated to underpin each of the teacher assessed grades you offer to us this year for consideration through EQA activity during 2021-22. As normal, where we identify concerns, we do reserve the right to conduct formal investigations and to refuse or withdraw certifications if necessary. Results release of teacher assessed grades for GCSEs, A-levels and some vocational qualifications will take place in the week commencing 9th of August 2021. This has been brought forward from the usual date later in August for GCSEs and A-levels. NCFE qualifications do not follow the same set results release dates as GCSEs and A-levels in a normal year. Therefore, we are continuing to work with Ofqual to understand the expectations and requirements for our results release of teacher assessed grades this year. We believe that where qualifications most closely align with GCSEs and A-levels, we will align with the date above. But that there will also be some qualifications which are eligible for teacher assessed grades where we may be able to release results at an earlier date. We'll provide more information on that in the coming weeks. We're working on a comprehensive appeals process to be aligned with the regulatory framework set out by Ofqual to ensure that every learner has the right to appeal their teacher assessed grade should they wish to do so. To support centres with this process, we'll also issue centre guidance on how to prepare for and handle any appeals received once results are released. As we work together to support learner assessment, certification and progression, it is essential that we maintain up-to-date, accurate learner level data. We would therefore be grateful if centres could ensure that all learners you expect to request certificates for during the current session, i.e. before the end of July 2021, are registered with us following the usual process. Ensure that all learners who you expect will or would have completed an assessment during the current session, i.e. before the end of July 2021, are registered with us following the usual process. Ensure that all learners who are no longer on programme have been withdrawn with us following the usual process for withdrawals. And ensure that you make bookings for learners on external assessment, even where they have been cancelled. More information on this can be accessed at the link at the foot of the slide. Centres should note their obligations under our centre agreement, which requires every learner to be registered in line with our requirements so that each learner can be uniquely identified. This is particularly important this year given the impact of the pandemic on assessments and learning, and it is also a mandatory requirement from Ofqual. Our customer service and account management teams will likely be in touch with you in the days to come to discuss the data we hold on your learners. We would be grateful if you could work with them to establish the clearest possible view of the provision we support. I'm just going to remind you about our approach to awarding for 2021 document. On our COVID response hub, you will find our approach to awarding for 2020-2021 document. This document sets out our updated adaptation blueprint in Annex A. It sets out our approach by assessment type. It includes our previous advice set out in autumn 2020 And it also sets out any further adaptations applied in spring 2021. In the coming days and weeks, we will provide you with more detailed advice and guidance, including, for example, confirming the granular detail of our approach and requirements in relation to teacher assessed grades following the outcome of Ofqual's technical consultation, confirm our adapted special consideration queries and appeals policies and processes for the remainder of the year to support teacher assessed grades, provide you with more detailed guidance on our approach to external quality assurance, including what we will ask you to do to support teacher assessed grades, confirming key dates for, e.g., the submission of teacher assessed grades to us so that we can issue results on time in August, confirming that you will need to submit teacher assessed grades to us through the portal you usually use to submit the outcome of assessment activities to us. In several cases, we will not be able to finalise our policies and procedures until we know the outcome of Ofqual's technical consultation, though we will try to provide you with as much clarity and certainty as possible, as quickly as possible. So we are now coming to the end of today's webinar, but before we close, Rachel, I think you have some questions.
Hello, yes, I do. Paul, can you just clarify again the position regarding functional skills qualifications?
Yes, of course. So functional skills falls into the Ofqual category where the structure of the qualification is not like a GCSE or A-level. They're smaller and used for mixed purpose. So these can be awarded through a teacher assessed grade only where assessments cannot take place on public health grounds or remotely. So we're going to be working closely with Ofqual and other awarding organisations to develop a common approach to determine when a learner can be awarded through a teacher assessed grade, and we'll share this when confirmed.
Great, thank you. Can I confirm that the remote invigilation service is now available?
Yes, that's right, Rachel. The remote invigilation service is available now for our functional skills qualifications. So once booked, learners can take their assessment at any time over a 6-week window, at any time, any day. It's a safe and secure system offering 24/7 technical support during the assessment. And if colleagues on the webinar today would like more information on this, I suggest to join our webinar on functional skills remote invigilation, which is taking place on Thursday the 11th of March at 12:30, and there is a link on our website for that.
Brilliant. Can you explain why there's another Ofqual consultation as we've just had one?
Okay, Rachel, so the consultation Ofqual launched in January that we got the outcome of last week was essentially to confirm the overarching approach to awarding this summer, including the classifications of qualifications which could be subject to a tag and those that can't. The new Ofqual consultation is with awarding organisations, and it's around the technical and the regulatory changes that will need to be made to underpin this approach. That does mean there are still a number of unknowns, and we are not able to finalise certain aspects of our approach until after the completion of that consultation. But we do expect that should be hopefully around the end of March.
Great. So Paul, what are your key messages for centres today?
Good question. I mean, my key messages would be, firstly, I'd suggest centres use the qualification checker tool to determine whether their qualifications are in scope for a teacher assessed grade or not. Secondly, where it is in scope, I would urge colleagues to continue with teaching, learning and assessing as best they can, collating evidence at every opportunity to demonstrate the learner's attainment of assessment criteria so that they've got a strong evidence base to support their teacher assessed grade. Where the qualification is not in scope for a teacher assessed grade, then use the flexibilities where appropriate that have been set out in the adaptation addenda on QualHub. And finally, I would say we're here to help, so please get in touch through any of the channels available if you need more support.
That's great, thank you. Is it possible then to jump out and give a demonstration of NCFE's qualification checker tool, and also just confirm where the qualification addenda can be found for colleagues on the call?
Yes, I can do that, Rachel. Just bear with me and I'll just show you a quick overview of how to do that. So just a quick demonstration of how you can locate and use our qualification checker tool, and also where to find the adaptation addenda. So if you navigate to QualHub and go to our COVID-19 response hub, you will find all things related to COVID-19 and adaptations. And on the main page, you should be able to go to the qualification checker tool and download. The tool will open up as an Excel spreadsheet, and then all of the qualifications with the qualification numbers and titles are listed with a simple column which says whether the qualification is eligible for teacher assessed grade or not. So for example, if I want to find qualification 501-16605, which is NCFE functional skills in English at level 1, we can see that this is eligible for a teacher assessed grade. I'm now going to just copy and paste the qualification number. So, having found the qualification number and whether it is eligible for a teacher assessed grade or not, I'm now going to input that number into QualHub. Search for the particular qualification in question, which is the NCFE functional skills qualification in English. And on the main qualification page, there is a button for adaptations, which will take us to the foot of the page where all the information relating to the qualification is held. The final button is around adaptations. In this section here, you will see an executive summary of the changes that we've made, and you'll be able to download the adaptation addenda to review. So there is some details around the qualification and version control and when it was last updated. The important information is the qualification has been broken down so you can see the different assessment types in the column on the left. In the middle column, you can then see the changes that we made during the autumn of 2020. And then in the final column at the end, you can see the additional adaptations that we've made for 2021. And this is available for all the qualifications that we have. So I hope that that's been helpful, and that's the end of this brief demonstration. Just a reminder then, if you have any further questions, you may want to take this opportunity to put them in the chat box, or you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter, visit our COVID response hub on our website, contact our customer service team on 0191 239 8000, or contact us at customersupport@ncfe.org.uk, or through web chat on the website. Alternatively, you could contact your account manager or your EQA. So thank you for listening to the webinar today. Really hope that you found it helpful. Please be assured that we will do all we reasonably can to help, support and guide you through the remainder of the year. So from everyone at NCFE, stay safe.